The Nike Pegasus Plus, formerly known as the Nike Turbo 4. What's old is new again, and boy, is it good to have this one back. Before I get into the Pegasus Plus, let's take a trip down memory lane because history of shoes is important. It's kind of what I do here. Going all the way back to 2017 when the Vaporfly 4% launched, which everyone knows about, and it changed running shoes literally overnight. The thing that I don't think everyone fully remembers is that the Vaporfly 4% launched side by side with the Pegasus 34. Now the Peg 34 was not a horrible shoe. It was actually very well liked, but it was not as exciting as the Vaporfly, as these new technologies. The Zoomfly was meant to be a more durable shoe, and no one had the Vaporfly Elite. So Nike really needed to bring the excitement of the 4% into the trainer space. So in 2018, they created this shoe, the original Turbo. Now, the 2018 lineup was this: the Pegasus 35, the Pegasus 35 Turbo, which was the original name for the Turbo, the Zoomfly Flyknit, and the Vaporfly 4% Flyknit. Now, I think those two, Flyknit, Zoomfly, and Vaporfly, are the ones most people had and most people remembered because by this time, these shoes were very widely available. And in 2019, Nike updated the Pegasus 35 Turbo to the Pegasus Turbo 2. Now, this is probably the one that everyone had because by this time, the Turbo already had kind of a legacy. Everyone loved it. It was getting a lot of buzz. And it did exactly what Nike wanted the Turbo to do, brought the excitement from the Vaporfly into the training space. But there were problems with this shoe. I think people remember this shoe as being perfect. It was far from perfect. In fact, it had a couple major problems. The first one was that ZoomX foam, which is produced by Arkema, and the actual name is called Pebax foam, was a very, very expensive material, especially in 2017. The same is still true now in 2024, but back in 2017, it was very much a new material and very expensive. Additionally, it was very hard to produce. Arkema struggled to scale up production to make enough Pebax foam that became ZoomX foam to really fulfill demand. That's why Vaporfly 4% were so hard to get back in 2017, 18, 19, because they just could not produce enough. Additionally, the failure rate for the material that Arkema was making was something like 25 to 30%, which is huge. Usually a failure rate in the single-digit percentage for a part is pretty massive, but a 30% failure rate is extremely bad. So Arkema was struggling to make enough ZoomX foam to fulfill Nike's demand. The other big problem with ZoomX of this period, the 2017 through about 2019 formula of ZoomX, was that it was very airy, very open cell. It was very much not a durable foam. In fact, when Nike said that you're going to get 100 to 125 miles out of a pair of Vaporfly 4%, they really meant it back then because that shoe would pack out, but the plate in the 4% would often save the shoe. And that's the real magic of the Vaporflies. It's not just the carbon fiber plate and it's not just ZoomX. It's how those two materials work together, the interplay of those two materials. So to bring that to a trainer was a challenge for Nike. And that's why they ultimately settled on this design for the Turbo of having a thin layer of ZoomX foam directly under the foot. So you got the feel of ZoomX, but it was protected by a carrier foam of React. That was React foam that was actually under the ZoomX foam in both turbos. And it was one of the first uses in running shoes of React. There were a couple others around at the time, but this was the one I think was probably the most high profile. And that React foam gave the very fragile ZoomX foam some structure. It supported it. And when you ultimately packed out the foam, which everyone did, it would actually give you something to run on. Because the problem with ZoomX, again, when you took the plate out of it, it was something that would compress and pack out. And I think I had 5 pairs of turbos between both generations. And then there was a weird shield version of a turbo with the booty upper. All of those packed out after about 70, 75 miles. It was basically just running on React at that point. That was just the problem with Zoom X of that era. The shoe felt wonderful until it packed out, and ultimately it packed out. Some people got more mileage. Lighter runners probably could go farther in it, but it just packed out. And that's why you didn't see a full Zoom X version of a turbo, because Nike knew they couldn't produce that. They were testing Vaporflies with no plates, but they were having massive durability problems with Zoom X, and they knew they could not release a shoe for as a trainer that was pure Zoom X. So in 2019, we were here with the Pegasus lineup. We had the Peg 36 as a very all-arounder, very neutral shoe, and we had the Pegasus Turbo 2 as the more responsive, what we would now call a performance trainer in 2024. Now, I went in depth in this slide in my Pegasus 41 review. I'll put a link in the description if you want the full story. But what I'm trying to show here is that in 2020, Nike canceled the Turbo. I don't think they canceled it in that they knew it wasn't working. I think they canceled it because it was too expensive. They were getting too many returns because there were a lot of delamination issues between the React and the Zoom X foam. The Zoom X foam would pack out. It was a very expensive shoe, so it wasn't lasting very long. I just think the Turbo was a very problematic shoe for Nike. And I think in 2020, they felt like they captured the essence of the responsiveness of the Turbo 2 in the Peg 37. The Peg 37 was the very aggressive peg. Now, I love the Peg 37, but it was way too aggressive for a all-around Pegasus. And this is the point I made in my Pegasus 41 video, but for the next 4 years, Nike's really been stepping the Pegasus back to the Peg 41, which is really the kind of next version from the Peg 36. They've finally gotten back to that neutral shoe. And that's left a hole in the Nike lineup where there hasn't really been a performance trainer. Now, a lot of people will say, well, what about the Streakfly? I love the Streakfly. I've done a lot of content on the Streakfly. My first video on this channel was about the Streakfly, but the Streakfly was a race shoe. It wasn't intended as a trainer. A lot of us did train in it. A lot of us did a lot of easy running in it. I loved it for that, but it just wasn't durable enough really for everyone. It was a great shoe, but it wasn't quite there. I have made the argument in other videos that the Streakfly was really the Turbo 3, but at the end of the day, it really wasn't in this conversation. But now in 2024, we're here with the Pegasus Plus. So Nike has essentially gone back to 2019. We are back to where we were. And I think it's actually quite brilliant. It's back to where we were. However, it's much better. And I think that's why Nike is paying a lot of homage to the tradition of 2024 back to 2018. This is the inside of the tongue of the Pegasus Plus. And I think it's really brilliant. I think this is Nike actually being very innovative and iterating on a design. They may have gone down the wrong direction over the past 4 years with the Pegasus line, but I think with the Peg 41 and the Peg Plus, we're back to where they were in 2018-19, which I think a lot of people remember as those were two really good Pegasus. And I think it's setting up Nike for, really moving forward with the Pegasus being the premier daily trainer again. And if it's not the premier daily trainer across all of running, because there's this whole conversation in running right now that runners are incapable of running more than 6 miles in any shoe with lower than 30 mil of stack height in the forefoot, which I disagree with very much. I think for Nike, with the Peg 41 and the Peg Plus, they've now brought the Pegasus line up to a very good standard that I think matches their race shoes very, very well. So now with all that out of the way, we can talk about this shoe, the Nike Pegasus Plus. And what do we actually have here? Well, finding specs for this shoe are very difficult at this point because Nike hasn't released any official specs for this shoe yet. They've released some weights, but depending on what version of Nike.com from what country you go to, you're going to see a different weight. They have said this shoe has a 10 mil drop. That's the only thing they really said about this shoe. But beyond that, there's no other specs. But this video is being recorded at the end of July of 2024. And as of the recording of this video, Running Warehouse is quoting that there's 33 mil of foam in the heel, 23 mil of foam in the forefoot, giving you that 10 mil drop. Now, a lot of runners have been saying that they're not interested in this shoe because it has a 10 mil drop. Well, the original Turbos also had a 10 mil drop. And what I'm going to say is in 2024, with a very compressive foam like Zoom X, the 10 mil drop that the manufacturer is telling you is just a reference. The real feel of this shoe is more 6 to 8 mil. This does not feel like a 10 mil drop. This is a very flat shoe. The Peg 41 does feel like a 10 mil drop. That's an 8 to 10 mil real feel on that shoe. But in this shoe feels much, much lower, especially in the heel. And in fact, if this shoe actually did have a 6 mil drop, it would feel like there's a negative drop. Again, ZoomX is a very compressive foam, so depending on where you're landing and how you walk and what your gait is in the shoe, your drop is going to be very different. So if you're a runner who's saying they're not interested in this shoe because it's a 10 mil drop, I'd say think again, because this does not run like a 10 mil drop shoe. Now the weights for the shoe have been spec'd by Nike between 240 and 250 grams, depending on the size, depending on what country, Nike.com you're looking at. It's all over the place. But the weight that I'm going with is the one that I've seen most recently is 245 grams or 8.64 ounces. And weighing the pair of these that I own, as you can see the left and right shoes, I'm getting 244 grams and 243 grams. So right in the ballpark. This isn't the lightest shoe on the planet, but it is a very lightweight shoe, especially on foot. And the way this foam feels, this is a full ZoomX midsole. There's no plate in this shoe. There's no carrier foam in this shoe. This is not recycled ZoomX. This is that more rubberized ZoomX foam. The ZoomX that we've seen in the Streakfly and the Invincible prior. Like I said, it's a little bit more rubberized than the version of ZoomX that you get in the Vaporfly or the Alphafly, but it's no less compressive or compliant, means you sink into this, though this is a slightly firmer midsole compound, so you're not quite sinking into this foam as much as you are on the Vaporfly or the Alphafly, but all of that wonderful ZoomX energy return, the rebound, the resiliency of this shoe is here. So you're getting a nice sink and you're getting a very explosive rebound in this shoe. Like I said, there's no plate in this shoe, and I'm pretty sure there's no shank in this shoe either, though we're not going to know that for sure until someone cuts this shoe in half, which that will be coming in the next few weeks, I'm sure. But this shoe feels like a ZoomX shoe. It's a joy to run in, and it's got a very, very resilient ZoomX ride. Moving to the upper of this shoe, Nike is actually calling this upper material Flyknit. And for the first time in a long time, this feels like Flyknit that I remember. The Flyknit from 2015-16, that very sock-like wraps around the foot type of Flyknit. And it's wonderful. The forefoot and the midfoot of the shoe are very much a classic Flyknit feel, and the heel of this shoe is very much the Peg 41 heel. In fact, we've got the same padding around the ankle collar, the Achilles flare, and the heel counter in this shoe are the same out of the Peg 41, which means there's a very stout, deep heel pocket back here that's going to hold your heel down, lots of padding around the heel, and it's going to actually protect the ankle. It fits really well. The lockdown in this shoe is very nice. I think the Peg 41 is slightly better because it has that arch lock system, but this one I think does a really good job. But what's really giving you the lockdown in this shoe is this Flyknit from midfoot forward feel in the shoe, because again, it's that very sock-like feel. Now, a lot of people complained about the toe feel and the toe volume in the Peg 41. This, I'm going to say, has a much higher volume than the Peg 41. And again, it's this Flyknit material, so it's much more, again, wraps around your foot much better. And we have the original Turbo racing stripe on here, but I can also say that this racing stripe, which runs right over the big toe, so if you're a runner like myself who has big toenail problems often with shoes, this one's not irritating my big toenail at all, and it's quite good. The original Turbo did irritate my toenail a little bit, but Nike's given a lot of volume here, and they've made this Flyknit upper much more accepting and adapting to the foot, where this isn't really causing a problem. So I think this is quite a good upper. It's the type of upper that I would expect on a performance trainer. Now, talking about the fit of this shoe, I think there's a couple specifics. I went true to size with this, as I do with most of my shoes. This is a US men's size 9. It's the same size I wear in the Peg 41, and it's the same size I wear pretty much in every other Nike. But I'm going to say from a length standpoint, this feels the same as the Peg 41, but there definitely is more volume in the toe box. If you were getting that feel of the upper material pressing down on your big toe in the Peg 41, none of that's here. There's much more volume. Plus, I think this upper material, again, wraps around the foot much better. From a width standpoint, as I've already pointed out, this is a very wide shoe, especially in the forefoot. But the last of the shoe I don't think is particularly wide. Now, I don't know if there'll be a wide version of this shoe. This is a trainer, and Nike often comes out with wide versions of their trainers, but I'm not sure there'll be a wide version of this. So if you have a very wide foot, this is going to be too narrow for you. If you have a mildly wide foot, I do think you might be able to make this work, especially if you size up half a size, because again, there's a lot of platform here in the forefoot of the shoe, and there's a lot of heel flare. So in the heel, there's also a lot of volume in the midsole. And if your foot is pushing out the Flyknit, which it will, and again, Flyknit's going to accommodate a wider foot here, you're going to have plenty of material to be landing on, so you're not going to be spilling over the midsole. So if you have a wide foot, you may be able to make this one work for you, or wait and see if they actually come out with a wide version. But otherwise, this is a very good, true to size performance fit, which I think this upper, as I said, is one of the better Nike uppers that they've done in some time. And I think Nike's done some really good uppers over the past couple of years, and it really is a Flyknit upper, which is great to see. Moving to the midsole of this shoe, like I said, this is full ZoomX, not recycled ZoomX, more the rubberized ZoomX that we've seen in the Streetfly and the Invincible in the past. But I do think it's slightly firmer. It's definitely firmer than what was in the Streetfly, though it's close. And there's a lot of engineering and sculpting in this midsole to make it work very well. You can see here that there's massive flares on the lateral and medial side in this shoe. And looking at the width of the outsole, this is a very wide shoe. You can also see the sculpting in the sidewalls on both sides of this shoe. That's to really, again, channel the energy in this shoe. What you're ending up with in this midsole is a very compressive ZoomX midsole, but it's also very stable. It's very anchored to the ground. It's very flat feeling to the ground. This shoe doesn't feel like a handful to run in. The Streetfly, the Invincible, because ZoomX is so resilient, there's so much energy return in that shoe, it can feel like a handful. This shoe does not feel like that. This shoe has very much a feel of stepping, compressing, and energy return straight out, which I think is a lot of the width, but it's a lot of this sculpting, which you could look at these lines on the sidewalls of the midsole, very much like a water bottle that has the crush zones in it. When this shoe compresses, these are sort of stacking on top of each other, channeling the energy down into the ground as opposed to out in every direction, which can feel like ZoomX sometimes. And when this shoe, rebounds, you're getting that energy straight out. So this shoe has a very energetic and very positive feel on toe off. Again, there's no plate in the shoe, and as far as I can feel, there's no shank in the shoe either. But it's a very, very, very positive ride, very much a ZoomX ride. And lastly, moving to the outsole of this shoe, this is probably the one place I can be critical about this shoe. The outsole in this shoe works. It's fine. It has good grip, has good coverage. I think it's the same rubber compound that's on the Peg 41. It does its job. But looking at past Turbo outsoles, from the original Turbo to even the Turbo Next Nature, which wasn't really a Turbo, I just think both of those outsoles are much better. In fact, I think the shape of the Turbo Next Nature's outsole is really what I expected to find on the Pegasus Plus. But again, this outsole, it works. It's just, I think it's a little bit too geometric. This kind of round cutout in the middle of the foot seems like I would like more rubber material here. I'd like less in the heel. This rubber that comes up over the heel, if they took that out, you could reduce the weight of the shoe a little bit more, because the rubber compound is probably one of the heaviest things on this shoe. But, from a grip standpoint, from a feel standpoint, from just how this performs, it does really well. I just think they could have done a better job here. But I'm really nitpicking on the shoe because everything else about this shoe is spectacular. So what is it like to run in the Pegasus Plus? I've already alluded to how good I think this midsole is and how this midsole actually feels. But the thing I'm going to say is, if you have tried on the Peg 41 and you thought the Peg 41 was too low to the ground in the forefoot, this shoe's lower to the ground. This shoe feels like it rides slightly lower than the Peg 41, which to me is brilliant. But I think for a lot of people, especially spoiled by max cushion trainers, are going to find that being a little too harsh. But if you're someone like me who likes lower stack trainers, the shoe that this is very, very reminiscent of in feel is pretty obviously this shoe, the Streakfly. In fact, when I put a Streakfly and a Pegasus Plus on different feet, from a stack height standpoint, they feel nearly identical. Now, this shoe actually has a little bit more foam in the forefoot, but I also think it's a more compressive foam, and the construction's a little different in this shoe. So this shoe feels still a little bit more minimal when you're actually running in it, but on foot feel, when you're just standing in both shoes, this feels very similar to the Pegasus Plus. And I think that's kind of music to a lot of people's ears who love this shoe and wanted to train in this shoe because they like lower stack, more flexible shoes. But again, like myself, found this being just not durable enough, because now with the Pegasus Plus, it really feels like Nike has taken the Streakfly and they've made it much more durable as a proper trainer, a trainer upper, a much more stable midsole platform, and something that can actually be used for a range of running, not just what the Streakfly was intended for. And that's the real magic of this shoe. This is truly a performance trainer. This is the performance Pegasus now. I know people have talked about other Pegasus and other Nike shoes being the performance trainer, but this shoe now takes that mantle. This is Nike's performance trainer, and it's brilliant. Now, I've done 3 runs in this shoe for a little bit over 40, almost 45 kilometers into this shoe. The first one I did was a mix of steady with easy. It was a 10 mile or 16K run. The shoe did that work brilliantly. The second run I did in this was a workout. Now, it's a workout I specifically designed to test plated shoes, super shoes. And this shoe did exceptionally well. In fact, I didn't feel at any disadvantage running that workout in this shoe with no plate or no shank. This shoe did brilliantly. The level of effort, the HR, the power, all of it was very much in line with the other plated shoes. And I'm talking Vaporflies, Alphaflies, Metaspeed Edge Paris, a bunch of other shoes. This shoe slotted in there very well and did a very good job. And then the next day, I went out and I did an easy recovery run in this shoe, and it did that really well. So I've tested this shoe through all of those paces, and I can honestly say this shoe performs at all of them. It does the fast stuff very, very well, but it also does the easy stuff very, very well. Now, would I recommend this as your only daily trainer? It's going to totally work that way, and it is going to be durable enough, much more than a Streakfly, but I do think this shoe is designed to pair with the Peg 41, because the Peg 41 just feels like the more all-arounder, where this truly is that performance shoe, and I think Nike's being very deliberate with that. Obviously, I'm a big fan of this shoe, and I don't even really think it's my Pegasus bias, because this isn't a standard Peg. This is something altogether different, even though it has a Pegasus name. It's just a very, very good performance trainer. And unbeknownst to the rest of running media and a lot of shoe tubes saying again that you need a 30 mil stack height 4-foot shoe to be able to run more than 6 miles in 2024, I promise you that if you like a lower stack shoe, or you're interested in learning how to run in lower stack shoes, this shoe is going to protect your foot. It's going to be very, very fun to run in, and you're going to find a lot of performance in the Nike Pegasus Plus. Thank you for making it to the end of the video. If you find this content useful, consider subscribing. You'll see more content from me pop up in your feed. If not, drop a like on this video because it helps this channel continue to grow, which I always appreciate. And with that, I'll catch you in the next one.